Shalom and welcome to Torah for the Nations. This is Shira Sherbo coming to you from Sfat, Israel. And today I want to talk to you about something that happened 50 years ago when I was in middle school. It was the early 70s. And it is so amazing to me. You know how when something happens at the moment when you're right in it, how it looks one way, like you're so close to it? Well, now I've had 50 years, right? And I can kind of look back and see how this domino effect happened. Like this event changed everything, changed the whole direction of my life, just rocked my world in a way. And then now I have the luxury of being 50 years older than that little girl in middle school and seeing everything that's happened in my life and how one thing led to the other. And because people are always asking me, how did you get to Israel? Because I was not obviously born here. I was born in New York State. I spent most of my life in Texas. I raised my family in Texas, and now I live in Israel. So the event that happened when I was like 12, 13 was that missionaries came to our door. And there was just this movement going on in the churches of Christ in the South, in Texas, I guess, in the southern states. Instead of sending missionaries overseas, they said, let's go door knocking in the north. So they came up to Rome, New York, where my family was living a pretty normal life. And these people knocked on the door and asked my mother if she wanted to study the Bible, and they asked her if she was saved. And my mom didn't know if she was saved or not. So they started having Bible studies with her, and they said, this is an important thing. If you're not saved, you need to know if you're saved, because this is you don't want to die and go to hell. And to me at the time, I was 12 years old, and it seemed like, well, this is a very important thing. Like, we need to get this right. We need to know if we're saved. And I look back now, and like my place in the family, I think this event influenced me more than my brothers and sisters, because my older brother was 16 and he was a teenager doing his own thing. And my sisters were younger, like 8 and 6, so they weren't old enough. But I was like 12, and I was my mom used to call me her big helper. I was the oldest daughter. My mom worked. And so I would surprise her a lot when she was at work and clean the house. And so I was close to my mom. And so I was just at an impressionable age in middle school. And so these people come and they're showing us, I had never read the Bible. They're having Bible studies with us and telling us that we need to get saved. My mom, from that point on, she got saved. She wanted, my dad came home from work one day. She said, I got saved. He said, what? Why did you let those people in the house? My dad was livid. He didn't want to have any Bible studies. He thought my mom joined a cult. So I just watched my parents fight, I feel like almost every day from that point on and their lives seemed to just take opposite directions. Mom was very focused. She went on door knocking campaigns. She wanted people to get saved. She came obsessed with everybody she knew needed to get saved. And my dad was angry. He didn't want to have any Bible studies. He thought the whole thing was just baloney. I ended up going to school, and we went to a Catholic school. That's something in Rome, New York. You're either Polish Catholic, Irish Catholic, or Italian Catholic. And I was in Catholic school as a 6th grader, and I remember asking Sister Mary Constantine, telling her my mom and I are having some Bible studies, and I just feel confused. And they said that the Catholics aren't saved, and the nun got she made an appointment for me to talk with the priest, with Father Matt. And that was something, it's so embarrassing, like as a middle schooler, to have to have your teacher have to make an appointment with you to talk to the priest, because usually it's just the kids that are troublemakers that have to, the priest has to get called in. And so I wasn't a troublemaker. I was a good kid. I was vice president of my 6th grade class. I made good grades. I was just doing well. And then I just got real interested in this subject that was going on in my home. And I was confused. And so I asked my teacher. She sets up an appointment for me to talk to the priest. And the priest was just so angry. And he said, when I asked him my questions, he said, "You're questioning the Catholic Church?" He was just like, just livid. He ended up calling my dad, telling my dad he needed to get a hold of his rebellious daughter. So this, of course, just made things worse at our house. And so this is kind of where my spiritual journey began. And I don't see it now as a bad thing that this happened right at that age, this impressionable age for me. I became interested in it. I thought it was an important thing to know, to get right, to understand, who is God? What am I supposed to do? What does he want me to do? And, but I had so much confusion. But I know that sometimes teachers use this in a classroom, like when people are confused, it can turn out to be a good thing, because when you work at it and work at it and work at it, just like if you're seeking after this lost treasure, and there's clues, but you go this way and you go this way. The thing is, if you finally reach the goal and you finally get through all the confusion, then it's something that you own, whether it's a math problem or whatever it is. And so I went through a lot of confusion, but I see it as a good thing. Like, it was something in my life that caused me to keep pushing forward and to keep trying to ask more questions and to keep trying to learn. And so when I got to be 19, that's the age where there were some people, some friends of my mom, they were from Texas. And, there was 2 things that I wanted more than anything. I had watched TV shows like The Waltons and The Brady Bunch, and it was in my heart that I wanted to have a lot of kids, a big family. And I also wanted God. I saw what was going on in my home with my parents having so much conflict and both facing different directions, going different ways, growing apart. And so I wanted to, they call it like being equally yoked. I wanted to marry somebody that we weren't going to fight about God, and I wanted a lot of kids, and those were the 2 things I wanted. So it seemed like, from what I was hearing from people that came from Texas, that this Abilene, Texas, they said, was the perfect place to meet a husband, and it was the perfect place to raise a family. And I took their advice, and I took my one little suitcase, and I moved to Abilene, Texas. And one of the things, okay, so did I get my goals for as far as the marriage and family? It's like yes and no. Did I get my questions answered about God? That was also yes and no. So the marriage and family, I got married, and when my oldest child was 10, I had 6 children. And so that part of my dream and my goal, I had my Brady Bunch. I had 3 boys and 3 girls, 6 kids in 10 years. And I was loving being a mom to 6 kids. My marriage ended up to be, I saw the same thing happening with us that happened with my parents. Like, we didn't grow together. We weren't on the same page. And we stayed married 30 years, or actually 33 years, I think, before we divorced. So we stayed together a long time. We raised the kids, but was it a marriage? Did it become everything that I hoped it would be? No. The thing about my desire to know God, to find out about God, that also was, as far as going to church, when I went down to Texas alone without my family, and I would be invited to church and I would meet people, these people became like my family. And I have only good things to say about the people that I met at church, because, you know, they would give me my baby showers, they would leave presents at our house at Christmas time. These people, the people that I met at church, were kind, generous, everything that you would want your friends to be. So that part of it, you know, just the camaraderie, just the feeling of family, of having people that were there for you, that was all amazing. So it was true that Abilene really was, I found it a very good place to be, very safe place to be at that time, and a good place to raise a family. Now, my questions about God, everything still for years and years remained confusing. And I just couldn't really ever get answers to the many, many questions that I had. So I got two pieces of advice that I can think of that really changed, just really affected me. One of them was when I was raising my kids and I was frustrated about trying to find a youth group, and churches were having problems, kind of like the overall structure of the church. You know, like I think we were part of like 5 different church splits, and I was frustrated, I was confused, I didn't know, you know, how to best raise my kids, where to go, what youth group to put them in, things like that. And so I got this one piece of advice, that the most important thing that I could do is be the youth group leader myself. And for 15 years, this retired teacher who was my neighbor, she said, the most important thing you can do is sit your children around the dinner table, because it's getting to the point where everybody's rushing here and rushing there, and the TV's always on, and it's always noisy, and no families don't eat together anymore, and you can't even have a conversation. So my kids all were athletic, they all were in sports, and so we picked a Wednesday night, because that was the night with no games and no sports, and we made it family night for a period of 15 years while they were growing up. And during that time, I didn't worry so much about trying to find, you know, the right denomination or trying to get saved and all this stuff. I just took her advice, and it's like I just tried to raise my children to be good human beings, to be morally responsible people, to be kind, you know, to do all the thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not lie. We would have really fun family time around the table with games and prizes and Bible studies, and this is what we did. And I kind of just moved away from getting stressed out about church and finding the right church and finding the right denomination and all that. The other piece of advice that I got during this time was, there was popular words like codependent, dysfunctional, all these little self-help kind of things. I was told that I was the adult child of an alcoholic, and that I was probably codependent and dysfunctional and all this. So I got invited, I was told about these meetings called 12-step meetings. And I went to these 12-step meetings. They're spiritual meetings, and you do what's called like a moral inventory. And what was so refreshing to me about these meetings was the focus was on fixing myself. And they would have slogans like, let go and let God, or keep it simple. Like, I remember just using it all the time, like, keep it simple. If I'm planning a birthday party, keep it simple. If I'm planning a vacation, keep it simple. And this really helped with 6 kids. It really helped me in real practical ways, or let go and let God, or detach with love. And so, like, I would learn these little slogans, I would learn these little ways of thinking, and I could get the focus off of, you know, like in my marriage, things were not what I wanted. And I didn't have to get up every day and be angry or think I can't be happy unless he does this, or if he quits doing this, then I'll be happy. It was like all the focus was on me and fixing my character defects and working on myself. And I don't know, that was like so refreshing to me that was something I could do. I can't change another person, and I can only work on myself. And so, and anything that I did, like when I learned take personal responsibility and don't be a victim, and anything that I learned, I could pass it down to my kids. I just felt like I was getting healthy, and I was just emotionally healthy, just out of dysfunctional thinking, codependent thinking, whatever it was that I had, or the words that we used, whatever it was spiritual, because I was working on my character defects. I was trying to be a better person. And so these meetings really helped me. So those were two things that I did. So when we got to like my 40s, my 6 kids, each one of them was starting college. They all went to college there in Abilene. And at the same time, I decided to go back to college. So we all graduated from college. It was about that time where everybody was getting their first computer and getting on the internet and everything. And so it's a great time of learning. When you go to, we all went to Christian colleges, and when you go to a Christian college, you take Christian courses. And I mean, here I was in my 40s, and I still had the very same interests that I did when I was young. My main interest was marriage and family and God. And I took a lot of courses on the New Testament, on the Old Testament, on church history, family studies, different things like that. And so it's, you know, for me as an adult, like I know we probably covered these things when I was in high school as a teenager, the things like Spanish Inquisition and things like that. But knowing me, you know, when I was that age, it went in one ear and out the other. So when I was learning church history as an adult, it was like so mind-blowing to me, because I thought to myself, I saw what happened to people. This was over in Europe, not so much in the United States, but like over in Europe, some big government, some big entity would take over, and they would actually come to your house and force you to convert and to like the mainstream ideas, the mainstream religion, whatever. You couldn't get caught doing anything that wasn't converting to the mainstream religion that the government said you had. I thought, wow, if I was alive during that time, I probably would be one of the first ones killed, because I remember one time going to the state fair and having my handwriting analyzed, and one of the main things it said about me was that I was a nonconformist. But I wasn't rebellious, but I was a nonconformist. I wasn't one. I had questions. I had curiosity, and I wanted my questions answered, and I wasn't one to just conform. It really served me as a teenager. I never got into partying and drugs. I never got into like, oh, I want to conform. Oh, I hope everybody likes me. Oh, I want to be like everybody else. It's like, yeah, to a point I wanted that. But basically, I was my own person. But when I read about the history of what went on, like if you could actually be killed, at the very least thrown in jail, have your children taken from you if you didn't conform to the laws of the big government. And so it made me see and wonder I wonder like how many in my family, if you went back so many generations, and the people in my family that were alive during that time, you know, you either were killed if you didn't conform, or you did like a fake conform. Like, well, let me just kind of pretend that I conform just to, you know, get along, just to stay alive. And that's what the Spanish Inquisition was. There were inquisitors that came because they knew a lot of people were like fake converts. And so they were inquisiting. They were asking questions like, you know, did you really convert to Christianity, we better not catch you doing anything Jewish. You know, we better not see you lighting candles on Friday night. We better not see you. And so I thought, wow, you had to just conform or die. And so anyways, it really made me think of how lucky I was to be living in America during this day and age. And when I asked my questions, you know, I still had my life. I was allowed to ask questions. I was allowed to think on my own. I was allowed to research and discover and I wasn't forced into being any certain religion. But I do have to say, though, that when the missionaries came to our house when I was in middle school and they said, you know, you're not saved, I wasn't worried physically that, you know, about being killed, but this idea of this fear of not being saved, this fear of going to hell was so real. I remember a nightmare that I had. In my nightmare, I dreamt that my dad had died and that we were at his funeral and that there were some men and like some religious men, and I went up to them and I said, did my dad make it? And they said, well, we're very sorry to tell you, no, your dad went to hell. Okay, this was my 12-year-old. My mother had to wake me up. I was crying, I was screaming, I was saying, no, no. So this was very real to me. It was very much a fear that kind of guided my life of, you know, I didn't want anybody to go to hell. I wanted to be saved. I wanted to know, you know, what I had to offer my children. And I spent my whole life. So, you know, just searching for like not so much a buried treasure, like a monetary inheritance. I wanted to give my children a spiritual inheritance. I wanted to give them something that was never given to me. Like I felt like both of my parents, like all I saw was a lot of confusion and not really knowing. So I didn't do any better for years and years. I was still always confused, and I just, like I said, I just settled on, I'm just going to teach them to be good people. And so one of the things about having the internet is it just kind of opened up the world. You know, everybody knows when the first time you get a computer and the first time how the information just opens up to you. So I had a friend that told me, you know, there's this website where there's this Jewish guy, and he's a teacher in Israel. And so I was still, you know, interested, still curious. I thought, well, that makes sense. You know, the whole Bible is about Jews and about Israel. And I was curious and I wanted to hear what he had to say. And well, one of the things I wanted to know was, you know, are the Jews saved? Because a lot of people don't think the Jews are saved, you know. They're always sending missionaries to the Jews to save the Jews. And so I asked this Jewish teacher, you know, well, what do the Jews believe? You know, because as far as a lot of people are concerned, the Jews are not saved. And he goes, what are you talking about? Don't you know church history? Don't you know the history? Of course we're saved. He goes, don't you know about Pharaoh? God saved us from Pharaoh. God saved us from Haman. You know, in the Queen Esther story, God saved us, you know, from the Greeks, and the Hanukkah story, the Greeks, the Romans, you know, all these big entities that have come against the Jews. What do you mean? What are you talking about? Are we saved? We're still here, aren't we? I mean, there was the Vatican, the Nazis, the radical Muslims. You know, of course I knew about all that. But I was like, oh, so you're talking about physically saved. Yeah, okay, the Jews are still here, I get it. You know, God has saved you. But what about this idea of you know, making sure that when you die, you don't go to hell? And he's like, oh no, that's not our this, we don't believe any of that. And I thought, well, yeah, neither did my dad, you know. And so the way that when I started to learn more, this is the way that I wrapped my head around, and I got an understanding of different perspectives and people using the same words but coming up with different definitions, to where it's really hard to have a conversation, because you're both saying saved, but you both mean two entirely different things. So most of the world has, you probably know, this game called football. In America we call it soccer, but around the world they call it football. And it's a round ball, and you can't touch it with your hands, and you have a goalie, and you kick it through the net, and that's football. Okay, but we grew up in America calling it soccer, and we have something else that we call football. And in that football, you have a brown oblong ball, you hold on to the ball, you try not to fumble the ball, you throw the ball, you try not to get the ball intercepted. Everything is, you know, with your hands and the ball and running with the ball. And so it's two entirely different sports, but we're saying the same word. We're saying football and football. So it was to me, it's like being asked, do you want to go to a football game? And you say, yeah. And so you get there and you're expecting one thing from the mindset and the way that you grew up. I'm expecting to see American football. And I look and I'm like, that's not football. And they're like, yeah, that's football. You know, so it's that kind of conversations. We're like, no, it's not, you know. And so what it all came down to was that it would be like someone playing with one set of rules, one game, and someone else playing with a whole different set of rules. And so the person that's playing with these rules can't look at the other people and go, you're doing it wrong, because there are people like, well, no, we're not, because we're not playing the same game. We're not, we don't have the same rules. We don't have the same instructions. We're not playing the same game. So for you to, so here's what happened in history is, say the Jews at Mount Sinai, they received these instructions. Say their instructions on how to play the game, okay? And the game is football, okay, what we call soccer. Years later, this New Testament is added, and this is the Christian Bible, and now the Christians are playing something called football, like American football. Well, if you're playing American football and you're looking at the people that are still playing the original soccer, you can tell them all you want, you're doing it wrong, you're not saved, whatever, you can't, whatever, you can, but they're going to be like, well, we're not playing the same game. You know, that's what I feel like was the big confusion lifter for me when I found out that the Jewish Bible just contains what I grew up calling the Old Testament. So they're like, there is a God, He has a plan, the plan never changed. Because you see words like eternal, everlasting, forever, for all generations. This is, was, and always will be the plan. And there's nothing else. This is our game. Okay? As soon as you say, well, that was the game, but now the game evolved into this, and this is the new game, or this is the New Testament, or this is the new thing that was added. And they're like, okay, well, that's fine for you, but we already have our game, and this is the game we're still playing for all time, for all generations, forever. And so there's people that, you know, send missionaries to Israel, and they want to say, well, you guys aren't saved because you're not playing, you don't follow the New Testament, you're not following the new rules, the new game, whatever. And it's like, you can't. What I realized was I had to choose. I had to choose like soccer or football. I couldn't go. I couldn't combine the two because, yes, you could say, well, they're both sports and they both have a ball and they both have players. And you know what? That's actually fine. Like for some people who don't have my personality, they're like, well, I just like to go. I just like the camaraderie. I like, the other people there. We're all cheering together and there's refreshments and it's fun and it's exciting. And, I get it, and I know that a lot of times we can just not worry about the rules of the game or what's going on in the game and just kind of go for the fun of the game. But that's really not me. Like if I'll go to the game, I want to know what's happening. I want to understand it. I'm going to ask questions. And, I like all the other stuff too, the camaraderie. And when I was in the Christian church, I loved the camaraderie. I loved the inclusion, having friends, being, there. But as soon as I would ask questions, it's like, it never got me anywhere. And so it's like, I realized that I had to choose between the Jewish Bible, that was just what I grew up calling the Old Testament, or the Christian Bible, which was the Old Testament and the New Testament. But as soon as I said, there's something new that's been added, then it was like I'm talking a different language. So salvation means this, and to the Jewish people, salvation means, like when King David said, save me from all my enemies. Everything was about physical salvation. So we're talking, it's like you can't even, there's so many things that you can't have the conversation because it's like one person's talking about soccer and one person's talking about football, but you're both saying football. That's the best way I can explain. So let's just say you come to this same conclusion that I did. Like you say, okay, I see these words. I see these words that say, for all future generations, eternal. These are my eternal instructions, my everlasting, my forever. You see them all the time when you're reading about God's plan. Okay, so say you come to the same conclusion that there was never a new plan, that this is the one-time plan. So you could ask, okay, so what are we supposed to do? Are we all supposed to become Jewish? It's like, no, not at all. Then what are we supposed to do? And so you look back and you say, well, what did people do? And you look at things like you have Adam and Eve. This is before anything. You have Adam and Eve, and it wasn't so much that Adam ate the fruit when he was told not to, but he never took personal responsibility. He blamed Eve. So we learned from him kind of what not to do. And then we see Cain and Abel. And it's like God tells Cain, you can overcome. Okay? You're dealing with this struggle that you have, with this anger against your brother and this jealousy or whatever. You can overcome. And that was the message that I got when I went to the 12-step meetings. It's like, work on yourself. Fix yourself. Take personal responsibility. Take moral inventory of yourself. With Noah and the flood, the people had basic instructions that they weren't following. They were stealing from each other. They were not even doing the basics. Okay? And so what every single person is supposed to recognize and know is that you're supposed to not... Okay, the difference between the Jewish Bible is we have characters like Moses and David, and everyone is flawed. Everyone is totally 100% human being that is flawed in some way. Great people, but definitely human, definitely flawed. Okay, as soon as you get to this new way, this new game, in the Christian Bible, we have the main character is superhuman. No flaws. Okay? So everybody's depending on that one, guy to come in and rescue us. It's up to him and we just have to believe in him. Well, That's not the story. That's not the story in the Jewish Bible. The story in the Jewish Bible is don't be sitting here, waiting for Batman. You all are Batman. You are not supposed to be victims. You are supposed to spend your life. Okay, I can give you a lot of practical examples, because this is like an all day, every day working on yourself. This is what God wants us to do. You're driving, and the person in front of you is going 10 miles below the speed limit, and you're in a hurry. Okay, you have to look at yourself and going, why am I letting this person make me crazy? Why am I yelling at this person? They can't even hear me. Nothing's going to change. This isn't going to fix anything. Or you go to eat, and you need to say, you know what, you had enough. You don't need to keep eating. You don't need to overeat. You don't need to get to where your clothes don't feel comfortable. You spend your whole day, whatever you do, you go to the mall, impulsively see something. You have to have that part of you that says, what about your budget? Do you really need that? Are you really going to benefit yourself by this impulsive shopping? I thought you're trying to get out of debt, right? Someone calls you on the phone and they're about to tell you this juicy gossip, and how hard it is to say, wait, just stop. You know what? I wouldn't want people talking about me. Just stop. I don't need to hear. Okay? Do you see how you go through your day, and all day long you have to look at yourself and look at what you're doing and have these talks with yourself and try to do the right thing. If you have some project that's due and you find yourself being lazy and just spending too much time on the internet or the TV or whatever, it's like, come on, get with it, quit being lazy, quit procrastinating. And that's why it really helps to be married, because, God said it wasn't good for the man to be alone. And when we're in a marriage, you have a lot of accountability. And the goal of marriage is for the two of you to help each other with this transformation, to have that mutual accountability. And it's if I say I want to improve myself with my anger, with my patience, with my eating, with my spending, with my speaking, whatever these areas are that I want to improve myself in, well, we can have our marriage partner help us, and we can grow together, and we can help each other. And so this is the goal. This has always been the goal, that we're all about being humans, 100% human, no superhumans. No one, no one can make you fat. No one can make you angry. We all have to take personal responsibility for ourselves, and we all spend our lives improving ourselves, working on ourselves. And when we can finally do something because God wants us to, we are made in His image, and He wants us to act like Him. He's very kind. He's very generous, and He wants to look down and see us doing the things and say, oh, they get that from me. Look, they're acting just like me. And so this is so refreshing to me to know that the Word of God, the Word given at Mount Sinai, was, always will be the plan. There's no replacement. There's no supersession of it. There's no new game out there that we are learning new definitions to words and how to play. This is the game plan for each of us to fix ourselves and fix the world. And when we get it right, when we all, become the people that God needs us to be and wants us to be. It doesn't mean being Jewish. It just means being a good person. You have the option to convert to Judaism, but Jews have a lot of extra rules that we have to keep about Shabbat and about kosher eating, and not everybody has to do that, and you can be a good person without doing all that. But when we get this, it's that's when we reach, that's when we reach the goal of world peace, of Messiah coming. That's when we deserve for Messiah to come. When we, as a whole, as a society, we've worked on ourselves, we've perfected ourselves. We don't sit here saying, I wish we had some superhuman being to come fix everything for us, you know. Anyway, so this was my whole progression from being, you know, worried about being saved, the confusion of all that, the constant like trying to learn, grow, investigate, and finally coming to the knowledge of God, of He told us right there in His Word, this is what I want from you. This is what I've always wanted. Nothing's changed, you know, and these are my eternal words. And so I hope this is the spiritual inheritance that I want to leave for my children. It's not about, you know, oh, I hope you find the right church, and I hope you get saved, and I hope when you die you're not going to hell, and all this stuff. It's not even about that. It's like, work on yourself. Look at yourself. Get to the end of the day and examine your behavior and fix yourself, and continue to do that every minute, every hour, every day. Like, you know, just work on it. Ask God to help you. You know, spend time in meditation, spend time in prayer. Be the person that you're meant to be. Okay? And so this is a spiritual inheritance that I feel like, this knowledge that I have of God, it feels so good because I worked through all the confusion, and now I know what I'm supposed to do. And it really is something that each person has to go on their own journey, though, and discover for themselves. And I just hope that I've given you a few insights in what took me all these years, 50 years, to learn. So, all right, something to think about. And if everything goes as planned, I will be, my youngest son's getting married, and I'm going to go to the wedding, and I'm going to be in the States. And I just wanted to kind of just put out a teaching before I left. And so we'll see you next time. Shalom from Israel.